Let's talk about hiring. It really should be straightforward. You've got a role to fill, you find a great person, and that's that. But if you've ever been on either side of the hiring table, you know it often feels more like a gamble, right? Like a total lottery. Even the best companies with the smartest managers make bad hires all the time. So what is going on? Why is something so important to a business so often left up to chance?
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the problem itself, what we're calling the hiring gamble. Then we'll dig into what we think is the root cause, something called the interviewer gap. After that, we'll get into a really important distinction, skill versus discipline. We'll then walk through a new way of thinking, an evaluation-first approach, and finally see how that can shift us away from gambling and towards certainty. All right, first up, let's talk about a problem that is probably way too familiar to anyone who's ever tried to hire somebody or get hired. I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? It keeps managers and founders up at night. You've got a great team, a solid company culture. You know exactly what you need. You go through the whole process, you meet candidates you really click with, and you send out that offer letter feeling super confident. And then a few months later, it hits you. This isn't working out. How does this keep happening?
Well, the fallout from this is huge. A bad hire isn't just a small mistake. It is incredibly expensive. We're talking salary, training, lost team morale, lost productivity. It all adds up. And the process itself, it just drags on, burning out your team and the candidates. A lot of the time, the final decision comes down to just a gut feeling, which, of course, leads to totally inconsistent results. And maybe the worst part of all, for every single bad hire you make, you've probably overlooked an absolutely amazing candidate for all the wrong reasons.
Okay, so if the problem is that clear, what's the actual diagnosis? Well, this is where the philosophy of an organization called CX25WW comes into play. They've put a name to this problem, a core concept that really explains what's going on. They call it the interviewer gap. This right here, this quote, gets to the very heart of the issue that CX25WW identified. It seems so simple, but it's a powerful idea. Just because you're great at your job doesn't mean you're automatically great at spotting someone else who will be. We just assume a top-tier engineer can easily spot another one. But this idea challenges that belief at its core. And here's the formal definition. The interviewer gap is basically a massive cognitive blind spot in the professional world. It's that space between someone's ability to do their job really well and their ability to accurately, objectively evaluate if someone else can do it. And it turns out those are two completely different abilities. So, to really understand this gap and figure out how to close it, we've got to dissect the two things that happen in pretty much every hiring process. And this, right here, is the core of the whole argument. So this is the crucial point. We tend to use these words, interviewing and evaluation, as if they're the same thing. They're not even close. Interviewing, the way we usually do it, is a social skill. It's about building a connection, having a good conversation. Evaluation, on the other hand, is a rigorous discipline. It's a structured process for gathering hard evidence.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. A skilled interviewer, right? They make a candidate feel comfortable, they have a great chat. The focus is on rapport, and the decision often comes down to intuition, that good feeling. But that feeling doesn't actually prove they can do the job. A disciplined evaluator is playing a different game. They are laser-focused on capability, systematically gathering evidence against criteria they set up beforehand. They're looking for objective proof, not just a nice chat.
And here's the bottom line. When we mistake a good conversation for a good evaluation, when we confuse that skill with the discipline, we inject a massive amount of risk into our hiring. We end up hiring the person who's best at interviewing, not necessarily the person who's best for the job. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, the interviewer gap. It makes sense, right? The solution then is to completely shift our focus. And this is really the whole purpose of CX25WW, to provide a system that closes this gap by putting evaluation first. Let's see what that actually looks like. The way you close the gap is to just flip the script. Instead of starting with the subjective skill of interviewing, you lead with the objective discipline of evaluation. You build a system where evidence matters more than intuition. So here's how it works in the real world. First, and this is before you even glance at a single resume, you define success. What are the concrete, objective things this person must be able to do? Second, you evaluate their ability to actually do those things. This could be through work samples, structured challenges, things like that. And then, only after you have objective proof that they're capable, then you interview the finalists. The interview is no longer a guessing game. It's a confirmation of culture fit and making sure you're on the same page. So what happens when you make this change? What's the payoff? Well, the results aren't just a little bit better. It's a fundamental shift in the entire outcome of your hiring. When you put evaluation first, you start hiring people based on what they can actually do, which naturally means the quality of your hires goes way up and they stick around longer. And because the whole process is so structured, you actually end up saving time and money. It also becomes way more objective and fair, which creates a much better, more respectful experience for the candidates. They know they're being judged on their real capabilities, not just how well they can talk in an interview. At the end of the day, this is the trade-off. You're moving away from a process that's full of risk, subjectivity, and frankly, luck, and you're moving toward a system built on high certainty, objectivity, and hard evidence. You're basically swapping a lottery ticket for a well-engineered system. So we'll end with this question for you to think about. Whether you're building a team or you're about to start your own job search, what would change if the process wasn't a gamble? What if it was built on a solid foundation of discipline and objective proof? This shift from guesswork to certainty is exactly what CX25W is designed to help with. If you're interested in figuring out how to close that interviewer gap in your own process, taking a look at an evaluation-first approach is the absolute best place to begin.